So that's the voices of the gay youth from the 60s. And I play you this story first because my favorite thing about these stories is that they don't make it sound like anyone helped them organize at all, right? They got free space at Glide Memorial Church, but other than that, their story is that they organized themselves. They created their own political advocacy projects, and they were able to kind of create successful movement all on their own. And I think it's always delightful when that happens, that the perception is that you're completely empowering yourselves. The reality of the history actually starts a few years earlier. In 1963, the National Council of Churches, very similar to today, decided that they were going to die because churches are notoriously bad for working with young people, right? So most people leave around the age of confirmation after their parents stop forcing them to go to church, and then they come back when they have kids. So there's kind of like this dead zone of a generation of people who don't go to church at all. Well, in the 60s, the baby boomers, the largest population in the country, was all teenagers. And so the churches were freaking out that no one was going to come to church anymore and that they were all going to die. It's very similar to kind of how churches are talking today. Mm-hmm. And so what they did is they went to the major metropolitan areas around the country and picked up hitchhikers and asked them where they were going. And they said San Francisco. So all of the denominations that were part of the National Council of Churches during that time, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Episcopalians, and the Lutherans, sent pastors to work with youth in San Francisco using principles that allowed youth to kind of organize themselves and hopefully to create programs where the youth would think that there weren't really pastors involved at all, but they were kind of occupying church spaces. And so in 1963, when these pastors from the different denominations arrived in San Francisco, the Summer of Love wasn't going to happen for another 2 years. Perhaps this is the first time the church was ever ahead of society on anything. But what they found in San Francisco was that all of the youth that were there were queer youth. The Lutherans, I think, knew that there was a big gay population in San Francisco. They seemed to be the only ones who sent a pastor specifically to work with the gay population, not to change them, but to just have a ministry with them. But the others seemed kind of surprised when they found those youth in that area. And what happened is kind of cool. The pastors didn't kind of come up with it on their own to work with these youth. It was actually kind of some of the civil rights heroes that we would think of as being parts of different communities that weren't necessarily working with churches. So the Daughters of Bilitis, Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin, and the Mattachine Society with Cal Hall and other folk who were working there got together, and because at the time they were trying to work on being a homophile movement and divorcing themselves from anything that seemed sexual, they knew they couldn't work with the homeless youth. And so they needed the pastors to do it because in that day, pastors were less likely to be seen as people who would molest young people, and gay people were thought to be more likely to do it. So it's funny that times have changed in that perception. So what they did is they said, you are not ready to work with these homeless youth. You don't have the skills. You don't have the ability to work with the population without coming off really offensive. You're all men. And so what they did is they created an organization called the Council of Religion and the Homosexual, where these gay rights advocates essentially trained the pastors to not suck while they worked with the gay community. And their work ends up training pastors and psychologists around the country. It's why you get the APA changes with the psychology communities, because this group really led the forefront of training people on why it was okay to be gay. They did it through strange methods like projecting porn on the ceiling, like hundreds of porn all in the same room so that any question you had but were too afraid to ask, you could just watch in a video. A funny story is that their porn was confiscated by the FBI in Minneapolis at a Lutheran conference, and they couldn't ask for it back because then it would go in the papers like, pastors lose big tits for you video. So they couldn't name the videos that they had lost and wanted back because it would look bad in the papers if these pastors were trying to get their porn videos back. So they went back to the FBI offices, put on full clergy outfit, and exorcised the FBI offices, saying, the Lord will smite you for taking our porn. So they had a little bit of fun. And so what they did is they started organizing these queer youth using the principles of Saul Alinsky, famous in the papers nowadays because Newt Gingrich thinks that Barack Obama is using the principles of Saul Alinsky and that it's a horrible thing. And so it was basically a ground up type of organization that tried to make the leaders invisible, but to get all of the work done that everyone else was wanting to happen. And so here's a little bit of the voices from those pastors. I went around and interviewed the ones that I could find. The thing that's notable about these pastors is the ones who actually got the work done and created the programs were all interns at the time. And this group creates a food program at Glide Memorial Church. If you've ever heard of Glide Memorial Church, you've heard of their food program. It was created by queer street hustlers and interns. And now it's the legacy of that church. So I just put that out there as a message for anyone who said, I can't do anything, I'm an intern. Because now Glide Memorial is famous because of this meal program and their work with queer street hustlers.